قال الله سبحانه وتعالى في محكم كتابه الكريم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم أومن كان ميتا فأحييناه وجعلنا له نورا يمشي به في الناس كمن مثله في الظلمات ليس بخارج منها كذلك زين للكافرين ما كانوا يعملون وكذلك جعلنا في كل قرية أكابر مجرميها ليمكروا فيها وما يمكرون إلا بأنفسهم وما يشعرون صدق الله العلي العظيم. And other two are like the one who was dead and was brought to life and was given a light to walk amongst the people. Is he the same as the one who lives in the darkness and never exits the darkness, and in this way we make the deeds of the non-believers decorous? And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, and in this same way we have placed within every city or place a people who are the big criminals of that place, who plot, but their plotting only works on themselves. However, they perceive it not. Sadaqallahu al-Ali al-Azim. That in this verse in the Holy Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about life on a different scale and a different level. That when we look at the conventional meaning of life, when you look up the definition of what is life, and you look at the ancient theories of life, and the ancient philosophers used to think of life as something that was made up of four elements: earth, water, fire, and wind. And then as they progressed, they realized that there maybe is a biological entity, a living entity. And as they progressed, today they believe, or they define life as anything as small as a single organism that has homeostasis and that metabolizes. So any cell, homeostasis basically means that any cell or any body that can regulate itself to live. So for example, the human body has some sort of regulation or some sort of equilibrium to make it live. In other words, we have certain systems like a nervous system, a respiratory system, these involuntary systems that allow the body to live. If we overheat, we sweat, and the sweat allows our body to cool down. So these systems, this is what they define life as. As a cell, any cell, be it human or otherwise, but any organic cell that has some form of homeostasis and has the ability to metabolize. So, based on this definition, is this what the human being is? Is this what the human being is, that we just live and we eat and we drink and we sleep and then we repeat? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, amongst His creation, He has given degrees and levels of creation. So of the smallest forms of life, or the baser forms of life, or the basest forms of life, would be the plants. So the plants are a form of life, right? But even the most advanced plant doesn't come close to the most primitive human being. Correct? They're both organic forms of life, except the most advanced plant, let's say a Venus flytrap, for example. Because this is a plant like any other plant, however, it has some sort of system that allows it to be able, it's a flower that's able to catch a fly. It has the ability to catch a fly. It has its like a mouth and it stays open, and then when the fly sits on it, it closes. So it has a sort of advanced involuntary process. So even that wouldn't even be counted close, to the most advanced animal. Of the most advanced animals are dolphins, for example. Whales, for example. That these marine animals, they say, have some sort of thought process. This is what they believe. Or they're more intelligent, they can understand things. They have the ability to show some form of emotion. So even that highest level of plant wouldn't even come close to the lowest level of animal, for example. So we look at the lowest level of animal, whatever that may be, the basest of all animals wouldn't even come, the most advanced plant wouldn't come near. And then the same thing with animals. The most advanced animal, as we mentioned, these marine animals, or some of the birds, for example, have a very high level of intelligence, and they put experiments for them, and these birds are able to speak sometimes, these birds are able to open and close things sometimes, and sometimes they say the same about chimpanzees to a degree, that chimpanzees have certain abilities, but they don't believe them to be as advanced as what they see through dolphins and other of the marine animals. But even if you get the most advanced animal, doesn't come even close to the most base human being. So even the most, how can we say, retarded human being, in the sense, obviously not in a derogatory sense, but as in the most primitive. So the most backwards human being is far greater than even the most advanced animal. So when they get to the human being, they started thinking about the human being, that what is it? If you've ever heard of the saying that says, I think, therefore I am. That where does the thought process begin, or where does the thought process take place? Where exactly is it that a human being thinks? Is it because, for example, if they stimulate a human being, they stimulate one of us in any way, they put some heat on our fingertips and a certain part of our brain lights up? Does that mean, alright, that's the part that feels pain? Maybe that's the part that reacts to pain. But is this the part that actually processes the idea of pain? Or is this the part that thinks about painful experiences? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. But recently some psychologists have been working on experiments that are trying to prove otherwise. Because at the moment they just think the thought process just spontaneously becomes. However, they have some theories where they can sort of push us towards what they want us to think. So one of the experiments they tried, for example, if somebody pulls an object out of their pocket, and they came up with this idea after the NYPD shot a black man for taking his wallet out of his pocket. So they wanted to come up with a scientific reason, other than the fact that the NYPD is racist, as to why they shot this man for pulling out his wallet. So they said, if we give a human being, we just get random people, and we let them hold a plastic toy gun. And then at 30 meters away, we let somebody pull out something from their pocket. And they have to instantly say what they think it is. So if they gave them a gun to hold, the majority of the participants, 70% of the participants would think that whatever the person pulled out of their pocket, the other person, was a gun if they were holding a gun. Even though it's a toy gun. And if they were holding something else, like another object, a cucumber or something, if someone pulled something out of their pocket, they would think, no, it's something else. They would say, oh, it looks like a wallet, or it looks like a mobile phone, or it looks like a whatever. So through this experimentation, they came to the conclusion that a human being will react based on the ability that he has. That he reacts based on the ability that he has. So, for example, part of this experiment, they would get a selection of choices. So you have two choices. For example, a job offer. I say to you, look, here's two job offers. One is to be let's say, a factory machinist, and one is to be a truck driver. Which one would you like? And so they noticed that the one that you offer closer to the hand that they use most, that's the one they would accept. So if they're right-handed, you put the job that you want to give them in your right hand, in your left hand, and it'll be closer to their right hand. Therefore, they'll take what's closer to their right hand. Again, this is pushing towards the theory that the human being will react based on what he has. But if this theory is correct and true, then why is it the people that have the most give the least? If this theory is correct, why is it that the people that have the most to give the least. And the clarity of this theory, the reason that this theory is correct and true, that if you were to get the niche of the population, who have the majority of the wealth and majority of control of the wealth, are the most miserly over the wealth. And they don't want to give it. And you see this on a daily basis anyway. With your dealings, most of the time, I'm saying this is the general rule and not the exception. There is exceptions. However, the general rule is this, that you'll find them, that they are the most miserly. And even if they give, their giving has some massive reason behind it. They are a worldwide philanthropist, for example. Or what they're giving is building towards something else for themselves. Whatever it is, whatever this deficiency that they feel that they have, that they need to fulfill. The majority of the time. So, is this what life is? Is it just spontaneous and based on what it is that we have? Islam offers an alternative. In Islam, the alternative is من عمل صالحا من ذكر أو أنثى وهو مؤمن فلا نحيينه حياة طيبة ولا نجزينهم أجرهم بأحسن ما كانوا يعملون. That for the ones who do good, whether they are male or female, and they are believers, therefore we shall give them the good life. فَلَنُحْيِيَنَّهُمْ حَيَاةً طَيِّبَةً وَلَنَجْزِيَنَّهُمْ أَجْرَهُمْ بِأَحْسَنِ مَا كَانُوا يَعْمَلُونَ. So we shall give them the good life and we shall give them the reward with what they used to do. So you get both. In this life you get the good life and you get in the hereafter the reward. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala pushes it back on the purpose that He created us. And a lot of the time, when we talk about the purpose, I usually bring about the verse that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that I did not create mankind or jinn kind with the exception that they worship. However, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had another goal in creating us. He says, إِلَّا مَنْ رَحِمَ رَبُّكَ وَلِذَلِكَ خَلَقَهُمْ. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah An-Naml that He created the human being to have mercy upon. In order for them to be worthy of His mercy, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given them a level of life or a degree of life that is beyond the base life that we see. That there is something above and beyond what this base level of life is or the way that we react to certain things. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has placed this soul within the human being and He's given the human being these peripherals to be able to excel and to exceed beyond what we see as a base form of life. That He gives you that ability that you may be worthy of His mercy. This is why we have the tradition of Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam. He says that on the day of judgment, act in this world so on that day you may look like human beings. So if you look like human beings, you can have our shafa'ah, our intercession. We will give you our intercession if you look like a human being. So obviously the people that don't, how do they begin to look? They look differently. Thus from the beginning verse that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that we give them life through this light. That we reinvigorate them with this special light that when they walk through the people they see differently. Why? Because they now perceive this light. And He refers to the zalimeen, or He refers to the non-believers as people that are dead and are stuck in darkness and that cannot be removed from that darkness. And we see this. Sometimes even the most vile acts of an animal do not come close to the most vile acts of a human being. But the greatest acts of a human being are above and beyond. In fact, they are so huge that they are eternal. That even when we come and people, for example, say that you come to commemorate these gatherings in remembrance of Imam al-Hussein salawatullahi alayh, that you come in remembrance of a person that died 1400 years ago, a person that is dead 1400 years ago. That this is a dead person that you were commemorating. When in reality, this is a living person. In fact, he is so living that he invigorates our dead souls. He re-enlivens our dead souls. That us walking on this earth, we reach a level sometimes where between a human being, a normal human being, and the dead, there's not much difference except for, as they say, the homeostasis and the metabolism. That's about it. Other than those two, it's as if some of these people have no humanity within them. From the actions that they commit, from the things that they do, the foul things that they do. But look at this, when a good action or a great sacrifice is made, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allows it to go on and to continue. Let's say some of the reasons that keep people among the dead. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Holy Quran, Inna ashab al-yamin fi jannatin yatasa'aloon. Verily the people of the right hand are in paradise and they ask. What do they ask about? An al-mujrimeen, about the criminals. Ma salakakum fi saqar. They ask the criminals that what is it that threw you into the fire of hell? So this is what they say. They say, قالوا لم نكو من المصلين. That we were not of the prayerful. وَلَمْ نَكُ نُطْعِمُ الْمِسْكِينَ. Nor did we feed the poor. وَكُنَّا نَخُوضُ مَعَ الْخَائِضِينَ. And we used to just sort of do it live. Hang around. Just hang about with our buddies and just sort of do what they do. Work, sleep and eat and just get on with it. Get on with it. وَكُنَّا نُكَذِّبُ بِيَوْمِ الدِّينِ حَتَّى أَتَانَا الْيَقِينَ. That they say, and we used to lie about the day of judgment. That there is no day. There won't be a day where we will be recalled to answer these things. So firstly, the most important thing is that they weren't of the prayerful, nor did they feed the poor. They didn't help the poor. And we used to just time waste. Just do whatever it is that we had to do. Their biggest sin is the fact that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had given them the peripherals, the hands and the eyes and the feet and the hearts and the brains and all of these senses, the five senses, to be able to understand and rediscover and enliven themselves, that we have been created and made for something that is far greater than this. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave them these abilities, yet what they did is they completely ignored it and said that we're just here for a good time and not a long time. So they ignored all of these peripherals, therefore they cast themselves away from the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the actions that they did seemed decorous to them. The actions that they committed, they felt like we are doing the right thing. The story about a king, and this is a story that I've mentioned before, however, it just highlights how we can become numb to the reality of what is happening in the world. So there's a king that has believers in his town. And so he gets upset. He wants to evict all the believers from his town. So he says to them, kick out all the believers from the town. We don't want them to come back in. They kick out all of the believers from the town. He makes sure that there's no one in the town that's a believer. Now, amongst his advisors, there is one believer. But this believer, he believes in Allah, he hides his belief. He hides his true belief. So one day, they go on a hunting trip. As they go on the hunting trip, they move away from the pack that's hunting. It's just him and his advisor. And as they're walking around, they see some music coming from the hill. So they walk up into the hill, and they hear this music, and they enter the... near the hill, there's a little cave, so they enter the cave, and they're just following the music. What's happening here? So they walk into the cave, and they hear the music, and once they walk in, they see an old man and an old lady, and they're both getting drunk. And the old man's playing some flute or something, and the lady's dancing. And he's so happy and clapping and dancing, and the area they're sitting in is filthy, like it's inside of a cave, but it's filth. So the advisor looks at the king, and he realizes that I've got a chance to say something to the king here. So the king says, what's this? And the advisor says, it's filthy, isn't it? He says, yes, of course, look how filthy it is, look how ugly the lady is, she's got no teeth, look at the guy, how old he is, and they're both drunk, and she's dancing, and he's playing the music, yet he's so happy, and she seems so happy because they're both spaced out, they're in another planet. So the advisor says to him, O king, do you know that there's some people that view us like that? Like when you have your lavish parties, and when you do these things that you think are all good, and when you exiled all of the believers, that there are people that see us in the same way that you see these people. In the same light that you see them, they see us in that light. And he says, really, who? He tells him, these believers that you exiled. To them, what actions that you do seem as bad as the ones that they do. If the people, those people in that cave, had seen the true reality of their actions, how do you think they would be? If they saw the true reality of, for example, they're dancing and they're listening to music and they're getting drunk, that how it would look on the Day of Judgment, do you think that they would remain in this manner? Of course not. I mean, even we can see that this is something that's wrong and negative. However, these people couldn't see how negative it was. In that verse that we read at the beginning, so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about that. And this is why in every land we leave the greatest of its criminals, the worst of its people. لِيَمْكُرُوا فِيهَا وَمَا يَمْكُرُونَ إِلَّا بِأَنفُسِهِمْ. That we leave them there to plot. The word makr for plot, basically what it basically means. Makr is when it's usually translated as device. That when you act in a certain way that looks good in front of the people, but or good in front of the people that you're with, but what is within is something very sinister and wicked. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says when they go in and they commit this makr, this act that looks good, but what is within it is sinister, we turn it over onto them. We turn it over onto them. At the time when the Mughal Empire, took over the Islamic world, give you a few examples. When the Mughal Empire took over the Islamic world, when they came to enter Baghdad, they made a deal with the people who were guarding the city of Baghdad. So they said to them that we will give you this amount of money if you leave the gates open for us so we can come in. So these people said, we'll take the money. He would have been like the commander over the guards of the city gates. He said, but we have a deal. We need to have a deal with you. And they said, what's the deal? They said, look, we'll open the gates so you can come in and attack. But we're Hanafi Muslims. But we don't like the Shafi'i Muslims. So if you come in, make sure you kill all the Shafi'is for us. And then we'll take the money and the deal will be made. So the Mughals said, yes, whatever you want. Just take that money. They take the money. They leave the gates open. What do you think the Mughals came in? Do you think they stopped and asked each person, are you a Hanafi or a Shafi'i? No. They killed every single person. They burnt the libraries in Baghdad. They burnt the mosques. They killed everybody. So these people were plotting against their fellow Muslims, and it flipped and it fell on them. In another story during the Mughal Empire, one of the kings of the Mughals, one day his mother passed away. So the king had an advisor that was a Muslim scholar from the general Muslims, and there was another lower advisor, not as high up, but he used to do some visitations to the king here and there, and he would ask him questions. Because some of the kings of the Mughals, they were interested in Islam, but some didn't become Muslims, some did. Some even became Shia, and they commanded. But there's a long history of during that dynasty. However, this one wasn't. He was somebody that took the image of Islam, because it made it easier for the people in Iraq to digest that this person is now ruling us. So one day his mother dies. He goes and calls his advisor, the general Muslim scholar, and he says to him, my mother has died, what happens after she dies? Sallallahu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allah. salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. So he says to him that once she dies and gets lowered into the grave, that she will be asked about what she has done. So the two angels, Munkar and Nakir, will come and they will ask her, what is it that you did? So the king says, but my mother doesn't know what to answer. And he says to him, yeah, it seems to be the case. So then the advisor thinks, I hate that Shia scholar that keeps coming in to the court. He's taking some of my limelight. He says, so what I'll do, I've got an idea. I'll tell the king that your mother won't know what to tell Munkar and Nakir, but this Shia scholar does. So bury your mother and bury him with her. So when Munkar and Nakir come, she doesn't know what to say, he'll tell her what to say. So the king says, this is a brilliant idea. So he calls in the Shia scholar. And he says to him, come. And he says, what do you want, O Amir? He says to him, my mother died and she won't know how to answer the question, so I'm hoping that you'll do us a service of going into her grave and we'll bury you together, and when Munkar and Nakir come, you can say the answers. So the Shia scholar understands it means, he's going to be buried alive and die. So he says, why would you take me? Do you really think me to be the most knowledgeable? He says, well, I asked the general Muslim guy, the general Muslim Sheikh, and he said that you are the most knowledgeable. So he looks at him and he says, do you really believe that I'm more knowledgeable than you? And the Sunni scholar goes, by far, much more knowledgeable. You're very high status. So the king says, all right, that's a good idea. So the Shia scholar says to him, if he has admitted to me being of a much higher status than you, one day when you die, won't you need somebody to answer the questions of Munkar and Nakir? So the king thinks and he says, I will. It's a good point you make. I really will need that. He says, all right, then bury him with my mother, about the Sunni scholar, and leave the Shia scholar with me. When I die, then he can answer my questions. So what he does, the scholar of the general Muslims, he plotted this plan against him, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made the plot fall upon him. In the same way, when we talk about Imam al-Hussein salawatullahi alayhi and the companions of Imam al-Hussein, but specifically about the Imam himself and the enemies and the way that they fought, that they had an idea that they were doing something good, that this is how misguided they were, that we are doing something good. And on the night like this is the night that Amr ibn Sa'd, he dispatches the head of Imam al-Hussein with Al-Khawli bin Yazid al-Asbahi. So this man, Al-Khawli, takes the head of Imam al-Hussein and he's so happy he goes back to the Kufa. That look what he thinks. He thinks, I've got something that's so grand, that I'm going to come with the head that they've been asking about, thinking that, when they see this, that they will be so happy with him that they'll give him a great position. And so, when he goes into his house, they say that he places the holy head in one of the rooms in the house. He has two wives. He calls one of his wives and he says to her, come, I've come back from the battle. She said, excellent, what did you bring? Because they didn't know, the people of Kufa, the army that went out, they didn't know exactly who they're going to battle. And this is why you see a lot of the times when you read the history, on the day of Ashura, a lot of the companions ask, Amr ibn Sa'd, is this for real? Are we really going to do this? This is Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. Everybody knows who he is. He's the son of Rasulullah. He's the grandson of Rasulullah. Are we really doing this? So he comes in and his wife comes in and she says, I asked him, what did you bring back? And he says, I have the head of the grandson of Rasulullah. So she says, curse be upon you. And she leaves. She goes, what sort of a thing is this? People come back with booty, with gold, with something from war. You have come back with this? So she leaves. His second wife comes in and she says, before I enter, I see from where the head has been left a pillar of light that is going up to the heavens. And white fowls circumambulating this pillar. She says to him, how dare you bring this? Look what you have brought into your house. And again, she leaves him as well. So this man loses everything. What he does, he gets so upset that he gives the head to somebody else because he starts seeing it that this is misfortune. So he gives it to Hamid ibn Muslim was with him. He gives it to somebody that is known as Bashir ibn Malik. And Bashir ibn Malik takes the head to Ibn Ziyad. He enters. Look, this is what makr is. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that the only makr they are doing is within themselves. That they think that they are plotting against someone, but the plot is against themselves. So he takes it in and he says, I have bought it. And Ibn Ziyad looks at him and says, bought what? He says, I have bought the head of the one, in some traditions, who is the son of the one who prayed in the Qiblatain. He prayed facing both Qiblas, which means that this is someone who adopted Islam very early. He says, I have bought the one who has the best lineage. If lineage is mentioned, he has the best lineage. I have bought the one who has the best father and the best mother, without a doubt, amongst all the Muslims. His father is Ali and his mother is Fatima, the best. So Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad looks at him and says, if you believe this, then why did you kill him? Why did you cut off his head and bring it here to me? He says, surely I will send you to him. He pulls out his sword and he kills him as well. That this is the plot that he came with, and see how it flipped back on him completely. The same with Umar ibn Sa'd. Wasn't he promised the governorship of Rai? So when he went back to Ibn Ziyad, what did Ibn Ziyad say to him? He said to him, where's the paperwork? Didn't I give you a paper? And so on. He says, yes, of course you did. He checks. No paper. Straight after he sent him, he sent Yazid to steal the paper. Afwan, he sent Shimr ibn al-Jawsha to steal the paper. So he came back and he had nothing. He says, I'm sorry, but you know how we work here by justice. And if you don't have the correct paperwork, then can't do anything for you. So they plotted thinking that they would gain something. And they thought that what they are doing is good. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made it seem to them that the actions that they did were decorous, were good actions. This is because they had no light to see. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala asks the people, in fact, it's the angel that is standing before the fire of hell. What's the angel's name? Malik. The angel Malik is the one, Malik is the angel that stands in front of the fire of hell. He guards the fire of hell. In the Holy Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes the fire of hell, تَكَادُ تَمَيَّزُ مِنَ الْغَيْظِ. That this fire of hell is from anger is going to explode. As Malik is putting these people into hell. That from its anger, that it actually has some sort of a personality, it's not inanimate, has a level of life. So he says, كُلَّمَا أُلْقِيَ فِيهَا فَوْجٌ سَأَلَهُمْ خَزَنَتُهَا أَلَمْ يَأْتِكُمْ نَذِيرٌ. He says every time that he sends a delegation or a new group of people into this fire of hell, he says, was there not a messenger sent unto you? So they said to him, قَالُوا بَلَا قَدْ جَاءَنَا نَذِيرٌ فَكَذَّبْنَا وَقُلْنَا مَا نَزَلَ اللَّهُ مِنْ شَيْءٍ إِنْ أَنْتُمْ إِلَّا فِي ضَلَالٍ كَبِيرٍ. So they said, yes, a messenger did come to us. And we said to him that God didn't send anybody, this is just a big lie. And verily, you are all misguided. And then they said, وَقَالُوا لَوْ كُنَّا نَسْمَعُ أَوْ نَعْقِلُ مَا كُنَّا فِي أَصْحَابِ السَّعِيرِ فَاعْتَرَفُوا بِذَنْبِهِمْ فَسُحْقًا لِأَصْحَابِ السَّعِيرِ. So they said, if only we could hear or we could comprehend, verily we wouldn't be of the people of hell. In other words, that if we appreciated the bounties that Allah gave us, of hearing when we heard the Prophet with the message, of seeing, of understanding. And how many times did Imam al-Hussein a.s. talk to them? Did it number 100? More or less? This huge amount of times he kept speaking to them, and he would say to them, listen and quieten down and understand. And then he would say to them that verily your stomachs have been filled with suht or haram. Your bellies have been filled with haram, and therefore you cannot comprehend and you cannot hear and you cannot understand. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to hasten the reappearance of our holy Imam Ajal Farj al-Sharif. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to have mercy on our dead. And we ask Allah to fulfill our debts and to cure our sick and to give our prisoners ease and release our prisoners of conscience and to protect the believers and again to hasten the reappearance of our holy Imam. وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين. رحم الله من قرأ سورة المباركة الفاتحة وأهدى ثوابها إلى أرواح المؤمنين والمؤمنات. تصدق الصلاة على محمد وآل محمد.